We're here at the Norman Manley International Airport collecting another shipment of COVID-19 vaccine, AstraZeneca. Those persons who got their vaccine in March, guess what? Your second dose is here. We have one for you in the month of May. So look out and please go get your second dose. We're here at the Norman Manley International Airport. We are doing a blitz for second doses for those persons who are due today. So one of the features of the double dose blitz today is, of course, that we have some added refreshments. People have to wait. And I want to thank Nescafe for being an important partner here at the blitz. Expecting to about 600 to 700 persons. As of now, we have done about 540, so we're going very well in that we know who is coming. We had called them, we had texted them, and these are persons who got their first dose coming back for their second.
First dose was very organized. The second dose, I come back today and get it. I'm all right.
This is my second jab because it saves lives, right? And the more lives we save, the better off we are.
So thanks to those who came out, thanks to those who have been a part of today. And you're going to hear about many other blitz to come in the future as we make plans to get Jamaica population inoculated against COVID-19. Today we are at the National Arena and we are doing a blitz for second doses for those persons who are due today. So one of the features of the double dose blitz today is, of course, that we have some added refreshments. People have to wait. And I want to thank Nescafe for being an important partner here at the blitz. Expecting to about 600 to 700 persons. As of now, we have done about 540, so we're going very well in that we know who is coming. We had called them, we had texted them, and these are persons who got their first dose coming back for their second.
First dose was very organized. The second dose, I come back today and get it. I'm all right.
This is my second jab because it saves lives, right? And the more lives we save, the better off we are.
So thanks to those who came out, thanks to those who have been a part of today. And you're going to hear about many other blitz to come in the future as we make plans to get Jamaica population inoculated against COVID-19. Today we are at the National Arena and we are doing a blitz for second doses for those persons who are due today. So one of the features of the double dose blitz today is, of course, that we have some added refreshments. People have to wait. And I want to thank Nescafe for being an important partner here at the blitz. Expecting to about 600 to 700 persons. As of now, we have done about 540, so we're going very well in that we know who is coming. We had called them, we had texted them, and these are persons who got their first dose coming back for their second.
First dose was very organized. The second dose, I come back today and get it. I'm all right.
This is my second jab because it saves lives, right? And the more lives we save, the better off we are.
So thanks to those who came out, thanks to those who have been a part of today. And you're going to hear about many other blitz to come in the future as we make plans to get Jamaica population inoculated against COVID-19. Today we are at the National Arena and we are doing a blitz for second doses for those persons who are due today. So one of the features of the double dose blitz today is, of course, that we have some added refreshments. People have to wait. And I want to thank Nescafe for being an important partner here at the blitz. Expecting to about 600 to 700 persons. As of now, we have done about 540, so we're going very well in that we know who is coming. We had called them, we had texted them, and these are persons who got their first dose coming back for their second.
First dose was very organized. The second dose, I come back today and get it. I'm all right.
This is my second jab because it saves lives, right? And the more lives we save, the better off we are.
So thanks to those who came out, thanks to those who have been a part of today. And you're going to hear about many other blitz to come in the future as we make plans to get Jamaica population inoculated against COVID-19. Today we are
Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, Member of Parliament, Minister of Health and Wellness. Dr. Audrey Morris, the Pan American Health Organization WHO Country Representative, Acting. Professor Trevor Ferguson, Chairman of the National Non-Communicable Diseases Committee. Dr. Kwesi Marshall, Chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force. Professor Fitzroy Henry, Professor of Public Health Nutrition, College of Health Sciences, University of Technology, Jamaica. Directors of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Professors of the University of Technology, Jamaica, regional and parish health team leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good morning. Thank you. You know, we learned from Tuesday, right? Right. I am Dr. Simone Spence, Director of Health Promotion and Protection Branch at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and it is my pleasure to be your Master of Ceremonies and lead you through this morning's proceedings. Let me say welcome back to those of us who joined us on Tuesday, and welcome to our new listeners to the launch of the Assessment of Fats in Jamaica's Food System, the Ministry of Health and Wellness report launch and discussion today. Jamaica is faced with the new threat of COVID-19. However, the old threats such as NCDs still remain. NCDs remain the world's leading cause of death. NCDs inclusive of heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes together account for almost 70% of all deaths worldwide. In the midst of COVID-19, preventing and managing NCDs have become significantly more important as persons living with NCDs are more susceptible to the virus. The increase in the prevalence of NCDs is attributable to mainly 4 risk factors: tobacco use, physical inactivity, harmful use of alcohol, and unhealthy diets. Consumption of industrially produced trans fats is estimated to cause around 500,000 deaths per year due to coronary heart disease. However, it is still being used in products such as fried foods, baked foods, snack foods, and in spreads. Healthier alternatives can be used that do not affect the taste or the cost of food. The World Health Organization recommends that trans fat intake be limited to less than 1% of total energy intake, which translates to less than 2.2 grams per day with a 2,000 calorie diet. The findings from the assessment of fats in the Jamaica food system will set the foundation for actions to be taken for the country to meet the WHO goal of eliminating trans fats by 2023. And the implementation of the Pan American Health Organization's Regional Plan of Action to eliminate industrially produced trans fats by 2025. The elimination of industrially produced trans fats is part of a comprehensive policy package to prevent diet-related NCDs, which comprises mandatory food labeling, ingredients lists, nutrition panels declaring trans fats interpretive, front of package labeling based on nutrient profiles, restrictions on food marketing aimed at children and adolescents, mandatory standards for healthy food served in schools, and limits on sugar content. These policy measures are supported by awareness campaigns to educate consumers on healthy eating. At this time, I would now like to invite Professor Trevor Ferguson, Chairman of the National NCDs Committee, to offer the official welcome.
So, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Simone Spence, Director of Health Promotion and Protection Branch of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Kwesi Marshall, the Chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force, Professor Fitzroy Henry, Principal Investigator of the Assessment of Fats in the Jamaican Food System Study, Dr. Audrey Morris, Acting Country Representative for the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization in Jamaica, Dr. Karen Webster-Carr, National Epidemiologist, Dr. Andreen Grant, Director of the Epidemiology Research and Data Analysis Unit in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, other representatives of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, members of the National NCD Committee, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, those, of course, listening online, good morning. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this dissemination meeting for the study of the assessments of trans fats in the food systems in Jamaica, led by Professor Fitzroy Henry. The completion of this study is a seminal achievement in the fight against NCDs, as it will provide critical information on the status of trans fats in the Jamaican food system and serve as a key reference as we develop strategies to achieve the elimination of trans fats from the food systems in Jamaica. The World Health Organization estimates that high trans fat intake increases the risk of death from any cause by 34% and deaths due to coronary heart disease by 28%, and that approximately 540,000 deaths each year can be attributable to industrially produced trans fatty acids. In its replace package, the World Health Organization recommends a 6-step approach that calls for the promotion of use and the consumption of healthier fats and oils and the elimination of industrially produced trans fats, so that, this to be achieved through regulatory actions while establishing a solid monitoring system and creating awareness among policymakers, producers, suppliers, and the public in general. The study being reported today is important and provides the first estimates of the level of trans fats in Jamaican food system and will serve as an important benchmark as we promote policies for the elimination of trans fats. So we look forward to hearing further details on the study findings. Once again, welcome to everyone.
Thank you so much, Professor Ferguson. At this time, let me now invite Dr. Kwesi Marshall, who is the chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force, to bring his remarks.
Dr. the Honourable Christopher Tufton, Member of Parliament, Minister of Health and Wellness, Professor Henry, Professor Ferguson, Dr. Morris, Dr. Spence, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this launch of an assessment of fats in the Jamaican food system, following hard on the heels of Tuesday's launch of the Jamaica Salt Cap Study. Dr. Spence and Professor Ferguson have ably set the stage for this morning's proceedings, and my remarks this morning will by necessity be very brief to make way for subsequent remarks from Dr. Morris, the presentation of findings from Professor Henry, and the main address from Minister Tufton. However, in my capacity as the chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force, as well as my role as the chairman of the Nutrition Subcommittee of the National Committee on Non-Communicable Diseases, let me relate to you how much I am looking forward to participating in this morning's events. As you will see, this study on trans fats presents a sound platform of current, nutritionally centered, locally based evidence derived from high quality research. Given our large and growing NCD burden, this evidence is critical as we seek to communicate the kind of clear, relevant, authoritative information that will help to yield substantive improvements in the foods and drinks Jamaicans consume at home, at school, at work, and elsewhere. So I look forward to further fruitful discussions and progress in this area of fats and trans fats, showcased this morning, but continuing and evolving in the days, weeks, and months ahead as we move towards shaping the healthier food and nutrition landscape all Jamaicans need and deserve. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marshall. We are always pleased to have the support and partnership of the Pan American Health Organization and WHO. And so therefore at this time, I'm pleased to invite the acting country representative from PAHO WHO, Dr. Audrey Morris, to give her remarks at this time, and she's joining us online.
Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, Professor Trevor Ferguson, Chairman of the National NCD Committee, Dr. Kwesi, Chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force, Professor Fitzgerald, Professor of Public Health Nutrition at UTEC, Dr. Simon Spence, Director of the Health Promotion and Protection Branch of the Ministry of Health, other directors of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, my colleagues at PAHO, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Last year, when speaking about NCDs, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, said, "The tragedy of NCDs is that much of the suffering is preventable." His statement was apt and timely. Put in perspective, non-communicable diseases kill 41 million people prematurely every single year across the globe, and many of these people are in the prime of life. Specifically, high trans fat intake significantly increases the risk of death from any cause by 34%, and it increases the risk of chronic heart disease death by 28%, and the risk of chronic heart disease occurrence by 21%. Furthermore, cardiovascular disease constitutes the leading cause of death globally, taking 17.9 million lives annually. In the Caribbean, the narrative is similar. NCDs serve as the leading cause of mortality, morbidity, and disability. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, people with underlying health conditions, including NCDs, have a higher risk of severe COVID-19 disease, and they are also more likely to die from the virus. Consider this. Having hypertension increases the risk of mortality from COVID-19 by 3.5 times. Fortunately, this reality is preventable, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness's report on the assessment of fats in the Jamaica food system is a step in the right direction. We at PAHO have long been associated with the fight against trans fats and its impact on health. In fact, the month of June marked 13 years since the 2008 Trans Fat Free America's Declaration of Rio de Janeiro to eliminate and replace industrially produced trans fat acids in the food supply. We at the PAHO Country Office are pleased that Jamaica was represented at the regional level in discussions and planning for trans fat elimination, including for the consultation on the draft of the plan of action for the elimination of industrially produced trans fatty acids, and a workshop on regulatory mechanisms to eliminate trans fatty acids held in July 2019 in Mexico. Also, Jamaica took part in a regional workshop on a regulatory impact analysis for the development of policies to eliminate trans fatty acids in the Americas, which was held in September 2019 in Washington. We are now also determining this technical support needed for Jamaica's elimination of industrially produced trans fatty acids, in keeping with PAHO's regional plan of action for the elimination of industrially produced trans fatty acids 2020 to 2025. And this plan aims to eliminate trans fats from industrial food production through a ban on the use of partially hydrogenated oils, or a 2% limit on industrially produced trans fats, or a combination of these measures. We recently conducted a situation analysis and needs assessment to determine ways to support existing efforts to promote the implementation of policies geared at eliminating consumption of industrially produced trans fatty acids. And I'm pleased to share that this exercise is currently being used to assess the supportive regulatory environment and ongoing actions It will also be used to analyze barriers and opportunities for trans fat elimination. This morning's launch therefore means that opportunities are ahead of us for Jamaica to implement a targeted approach to reduce industrially produced trans fats. Please know that the Pan American Health Organization stands ready to support the government of Jamaica. Again, kudos to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the CARICOM Fan Project, Resolve to Save Lives, and the University of Technology for your work to make this research a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morris, and thank you again for the continued work and support of the Pan American Health Organization. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will hear the results of the study that was conducted. To present the findings, we have with us the Principal Investigator and Professor of Public Health Nutrition at the University of Technology, Jamaica, Professor Fitzroy Henry.
That's it. Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, Professor Trevor Ferguson, Chairman of the NCD Committee, Dr. Kwesi Marshall, Chairman of the National Food Industry Task Force, Dr. Spence, Director of Health Policy, Promotion, and many other things. Colleagues and friends, members of the press, good morning to you all. It is a pleasure indeed for me to be presenting the preliminary findings of the study that we did on fats in Jamaica. You will see from the slide I have two of my colleagues here with me, Mr. Rashid Perry, give them a wave. He is from UTech as well. And we also have Mr. Dwight Bremer, give them a wave. He is the director of the chemistry branch at the Bureau of Standards and one of the key persons who was involved in the analysis and other aspects, the planning and interpretation of results and so on, and will be very important as we move forward in terms of looking at standards and what we want to do with trans fats. I want also to thank the CARICOM Fan Project, the Resolve to Save Lives, also known as the LINKS project that Minister Tufton was instrumental in facilitating for this study, the National Health Fund that would be involved in the educational aspects as we move forward, and of course my own University of Technology, Jamaica, who provided all kinds of support for this. In this presentation, I was asked to give some background before we go into the actual results, so I will do so. I'm going to talk briefly about fats, and they are good ones, they are bad ones, and they are very bad ones. How bad is the problem in Jamaica, which will come into the study? What options do we have? And what can be done now. So fat. We usually give fat a general and global bad name, but it is not all bad because fats are very important for us. It, for example, it's about 60% of our human brain is fat. And that should be unsaturated fat. For many of us, it might not be. But anyway, 60% of our brain is fat. Vitamins A, D, E, and E, it carries them through the body, provides a reserve store of energy. It promotes healthy skin. It promotes normal cell growth. It acts like a cushion for many organs in the body, and it helps us to feel full longer. And of course, it adds flavor to food. So if fat is doing all of those nice things, what then is the problem? The problem is that we eat not only too much fat, but the wrong kinds of fat. Doing so can increase the risk of serious health concerns and illness. Just looking at Jamaica's situation in terms of the fats that we have, that red line is where we should be in terms of our health consumption, our fat consumption. And the bottom blue is from local production, and the top is from imports. And you can see that we are about 2 times or more the amount of fat we have available and consuming in Jamaica, and the imports are contributing quite a bit to that. High fat diets are linked to heart disease, to obesity, and cardiovascular related problems. Bad fats build up plaque in the bloodstream, the arteries. The top one shows the normal one, and the cross section to the right shows free flowing, how blood should be free flowing. But when the plaque is built up, that orangish looking plaque that you see there, cross section, shows what happens with the artery, and the blood is struggling to get through. So plaque buildup leads to a heart attack, and it is dangerous, life-threatening event. That is copyright, okay? So, so we can see what happens when the plaque builds up and what can happen. You can suffer. So just briefly then, the fats. There are 3 types of fat that we are aware with, that we know. The good one, which is the monosaturated, another good one, the polyunsaturated, and a bad one, which is the saturated. And there are reasons why they are so. The thing is that the good and the bad are often found in the same foods. For example, in butter, in chicken fat, and in corn oil. They are made up of different combinations of fatty acids. But what is key is the amount of saturation, the saturated fats, and the length of the chain that makes it different. So, for example, when you look at different types of fats, you see on the extreme right, better put on my glasses. What is that, corn oil? Anyway, you see the different types of fat moving right across to coconut oil, which is the other end. So even though coconut oil is a saturated fat, notice that the chain length, it's a lot of medium chain, which means that it moves out of the blood system very quickly. So the chain length is making the coconut oil not as dangerous, for example, as butter. So it's just to clarify that we have to, not all fats are born equal. So we have to look at those different types there. And then, of course, we come to hydrogenation. And this is the process in which hydrogen atoms are added to the unsaturated fat. When it's fully hydrogenated, it makes the fat waxy and too hard. Partially hydrogenated provides more flexibility for the manufacturer. With high temperature and a metal, usually nickel and aluminum in some cases, this forms a new type of fat called trans fatty acid. Trans fatty acids have many of the same properties as the saturated fat and more, and that is why this is the worst fat. When we look at studies that were done on trans fatty acids, we see, and those dots are different studies put together, and the best line drawn through them, you see that trans fatty acid increases the amount of the bad cholesterol, which is LDL, and it reduces the amount of the good cholesterol, the HDL. So saturated fat increases LDL, but trans fat not only increases LDL, but it reduces HDL. This is why it is the worst type of fat. When we look at the risk to coronary heart disease, we see those below, the mono and the poly, actually have, as having a reduction, and the green is saturated fat, and we see how trans fat is way up there in terms of the risk of coronary heart disease. And this is why we are so concerned about saturated fat and trans fat. So, why are trans fat used? Because it makes food stay fresh and on the shelf, and also for a longer period of time. It improves the texture of the food and the flavor stability. It doesn't get rancid as quickly as the others. And of course, it's reusable in deep frying circumstances. So this is really a big attraction for manufacturers. And we can see that it's used in different types of products. So why are trans fats bad? As I said earlier about the cholesterols, and there are many other aspects that trans fat confer negative consequences to us. So how big is the risk of trans fat? We see small amounts of trans fat, like 4.5 grams, increases the relative risk for coronary heart disease. And as you go across to about 13 and so grams, you see how much it actually doubles the relative risk for coronary heart disease. And when we compare that with some fries, you see the trans fat, the third line at the bottom there, it's about 8 grams. And if you look at the reds, you see how much it increases. And this is just a medium fries. When you look at a donut, we see how many grams of trans fat that will have and how. And if you eat them together, obviously it accumulates. It means that the risk is going up there. And we do that quite often. If you look at pound cake, one slice increases the risk and so on. Just a cookie has trans fats. In Jamaica, we have been importing quite a lot of vegetable oils. And the question is, to what extent are these oils contributing to the trans fat situation in Jamaica? So we come to the study. How big is the problem in Jamaica? Are our favorites safe? And we know, I look at those snacks at the back there, and I am tempted to go for them right now. But the question is, how safe are our favorites? It's nothing wrong with the product, it's the oil that you use to make the product, okay? So that doesn't mean people will stop eating their muffins or whatever it is, but we don't know what is in it, and this is why the background to doing this study. So the objective is to determine the concentration of trans fatty acids in commonly consumed Jamaican foods. And we looked at 296 different types of foods. And the method we use is the gas chromatography. Fancy word, but this is what a machine looks like, the gas cylinders at the side. And basically the gas separates the different types of fats. And you can get a printout of the different fats. So that's the gas there going in. You put in your sample, it passes through a process. And then next to the red, you see a printout, which comes from the machine. With the different fats separated. To give an example, this is what we found in our study actually for corned beef. I don't know if you can see the peaks there. There are different peaks and there are different fats and the arrow pointing to where the trans fat is. And you can identify where it is on that line. And we can see the label for that corned beef saying 0 trans fat, but actually we do have a peak there, and you can do calculations. Don't stress yourself. Don't stress yourself. you see the peak, and it raises the question about labeling in relation to what you find. So this is just corned beef, and there are other fats there on the profile. When we look at mayonnaise, We see again the peak, the arrow is pointing to the trans fat peak. And when we look at the label for that particular product, we see no trans fat. The red arrow is showing where that is. So the actual results then. What are percentage of the food categories with trans fat? So we looked at different types of foods, and it was biased because we looked at the foods that we know should contain trans. So this is not all the foods in Jamaica, okay? This is just the foods that we know from the literature that should contain trans fats. And we see very high, if you look at confectionery, you see how high the percentages there, and it comes down in several of the other food products. Okay, this is just the percentage that have trans fat. Notice that the canned foods had none at all, or the beverages that we looked at had no trans fat. Okay? But this is just saying whether there was trans fat in the product. What we are even more interested in is which products had high levels of trans fat. Okay, so this next slide now is showing those that had more than 2% of total fat as trans fat. And later on, I'll show you the same categories with more than 30% of total fat as saturated fat, because trans fat is only one of the challenges. We can't forget that saturated fat is also a challenge. Okay, so I'm going to show you now. So even though confectionery had the most in terms of frequency, in terms of the highest concentrations, more than 2% of fat as trans fat, we see the dairy products, and it goes down like that. And of course, as we know, when we eat different types of products in combination, we see how it accumulates, and it reaches over the limits that we will set at some point in the near future, we hope. But we're seeing what is happening there with trans fat. So you see confectionery, many of them had it, but it is not as concentrated as in dairy. So this shows you the ones with high fats. And then when we now look at those that had the same products that had high saturated fat along with the trans fat, we see the figures here. So this is
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And seems we're meeting in this place more frequently than normal, given that we were here a few days ago and I see a lot of familiar faces. But let me recognize you, Dr. Simone Spence, our chair, and the team at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Webster Carr, our epidemiologist, and others who are here as part of the policy and NCD response team. Professor Ferguson, chairman of the NCD committee, and Dr. Marshall, National Food Industry Task Force, and of course Professor Henry, who just gave what I consider to be a very eye-opening, enlightening, educational, and indeed worrying presentation that is grounded in facts, which I think all of Jamaica, if I were to make a wish today, sir, it would be that all of Jamaica had the opportunity to be exposed to the findings of this trans fat study. And I'm recognizing, of course, Deborah Chen from the Heart Foundation, who is always here. You gave the main address, so I will only give my thoughts on this process. And my thoughts on the process, to begin with, is that as a people, as a country, and indeed as a government, a collection of agencies and ministries who run the executive arm of government, we have to be concerned. And indeed, from a public health perspective, we must see it as our duty and obligation to raise the level of awareness in our population, starting with critical stakeholder groups and the leadership at all levels of our country on these data findings, in this case around what is in our foods, and specifically as it relates to trans fats and the ills or the consequences or the risks of consuming trans fats. So I begin by saying I'm really pleased about the work that has been done, and I want to join Prof. Henry in recognizing the CARICOM Fund Project, the Resolve to Save Lives group, the Ministry of Health and Wellness with the support of the National Health Fund, and of course the University of Technology. Because for starters, the partnership that is clearly highlighted here has led to very valuable information, and information perhaps that otherwise would not have been possible if we did not have this partnership. And I really feel that it is so important to stress the need in public health, beyond the general principles of partnership and the benefits, but in public health, for us to continue to forge the alliances that are necessary to work together in the interests, of course, of the population that we are committed to serving. And this is another very positive demonstration of the value of that partnership, where we bring researchers together, we bring non-governmental organizations together, academia, and of course the policymakers to be a part of a focused examination or interrogation around a particular issue. So I want to echo the the sentiments expressed around the importance of the partnership, and that is very key. The other issue is the issue at hand, which is why this research was done. And I think it's impatient of debate. Again, it's not anecdotal, it is scientific, that what is in our foods impact on the quality of our lives. And sometimes we argue the point as if it is something worth arguing. It's not. It is an absolute reality that at some point in our lives, the quality of life that we experience as global citizens, and in this instance as Jamaicans, will be impacted by dietary considerations and choices that we make. And the real challenge with all of this is that it's not just about our resolve to do the right thing to consume what is in our best interest. That in and of itself is a challenge, because we have to now nudge, encourage, motivate, and in some instances legislate, I believe, certain types of actions to encourage better quality of life from a nutrition consumption standpoint. And we see our role as a key player in that regard from public health's perspective. But additionally, it is so important that the information is there. And you start with the information and the accuracy of the information, so that when you make your case, it is unchallengeable by those who may feel that it is worth challenging for one reason or the other. And we have always sought to ground the arguments that we make in the science of the day, in the methodology that leads to conclusions that have 1 or 2 degrees of margins of error. So for the most part, it is accurate, it is correct, even if not 100% precise. You rarely get that kind of precision, even when you mix 2 chemicals together. Isn't that so, Head of Epidemiology, Dr. Websakar? But what does the science and the data say? It says trans fats is the worst form of fat. It also says that some fats are good, as outlined in this study, and that we should say that, and we should say which type of fats are good for us, and at the same time highlight the consequences of those that are bad. It also says that 500,000 people each year meet their demise from the ongoing and consistent consumption of trans fats, which lead ultimately to coronary conditions, heart disease conditions. I'm not a doctor, but so forgive me if I slip up with 1 or 2 of the terminologies, but I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. And that is data that is collected. That's data that is factual. It can't be challenged or shouldn't be challenged. But even more worryingly, the data is suggesting, which is where we have a real challenge, that existing data out there does not meet the fit and proper test, if you will, of accuracy and of sufficiency to give the consuming public at least a chance, an opportunity to make a decision around what is in their best interest. And that, to me, is a reflection of the failure of all of us who have assumed positions of leadership in one form or another with a mandate that involves encouraging the best practices around, in this instance, consumption habits. It is the biggest challenge that we face, I believe, in the first instance. How do we gather the accurate information and ensure that consumers have have the right and the opportunity to at least make decisions grounded in accurate information? And one of my calls here today has to be for us to engage in deeper reflection and follow-up action. And I start with me as minister and as part of a government that I am proud of, and I work hard with for the people of Jamaica each day, as all of us do, that we are going to have to be more assertive in our advocacy. We can't do it alone. We depend on other ministries and ministers and technocrats. I see the Bureau of Standards here, and I sent a note to Dr. Spence to say we need a meeting with the Bureau, and I need a meeting with my colleague minister, because what has been revealed in this information here is that while there is no law and requirement for labeling at this point in time, we're working towards it, right? As CARICOM, but also as a country. In other jurisdictions, there are specific laws. Our main trading partners And what is very clear is that we are applying a double standard in terms of the requirements to meet the trading partners market. But as far as our own people are concerned, it probably is not that important. And from a legislation perspective, there seems, to my mind, not enough urgency to level the playing field, at least to ensure that our consumers have that right to know exactly what they're putting in their bodies. But worse, to correct misleading information that exists on some of these labels. I mean, it is frightening to me that if I go to the supermarket and I, as a very, assuming I am sometimes, conscientious consumer about what I put in my body, which I do from periodically, I probably need to do more of it, and I take up a label and I look and I read 0 trans fat, but then when it's subject to the scientific test, you find that there is a level of trans fat in that particular item. As far as I'm concerned, that represents misleading information, misleading advertising, and we have a duty to correct that wrong. And I think we're going to have to spend time to use data of this kind to highlight the deficiencies in the system and to advocate for greater action to correct those deficiencies. Now, I am prepared to say that all of us, as a collective that make up the society, are well-intentioned and see the value in our consumers and our citizens having the best possible option to solve the problems that they have, whether it is their daily consumption or it is their other needs that they seek or wants that they seek to satisfy. And so we must start from a basis of bringing everybody to the table and giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. So if there is misleading advertising out there, I'm prepared in the first instance to say it's not because somebody wants to mislead, it's probably because they don't know or they don't take the trouble to validate or verify, particularly where it is an import and a high import content raw material which makes up our society. So maybe that information is required, or advocacy is an advocacy that should extend beyond just the consuming public, but those who provide the service to the consuming public. I think we should start from that basis, because to do otherwise would be almost to accuse some of our stakeholders of being insincere or misleading in the claims that they make about their product. And that, to my mind, is an injury that is not one that I'm prepared to accommodate at this point in time. So I think the study is essential to starting a dialogue, and a dialogue that perhaps should have started long ago. I think it is essential to advocating in the first instance for voluntary compliance as an immediate response. I think it is essential to working towards the medium-term goals that we have by informing and educating, supporting, advising the adjustments and the agenda and the work program for that agenda over the medium term. And I'm talking in this instance specifically about the elimination of trans fats based on the signatory to this convention by 2025. I think it is incumbent on us to use this data to put in place a plan that will initially begin to educate and inform. And I'm saying all the stakeholders, the manufacturers, the consumers, the policymakers, the advocates, the NGOs, and that is my challenge to us, Simone. You see, I'm giving you a whole heap of burden since we start, but it's a good thing you can handle it, right? That is my challenge to us. That I want the next phase to be a plan of action that is rolled out, that takes this information and say, listen, this is what we need to achieve right now, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, ultimately leading to a more informed consumer and leading to better and accurate particulars on labels. And this is why front of package labeling cannot be detached from this conversation. So I'm happy that you brought it in, because what you have evidently said to us is that the issue now is not just about the information on the package, back or front. It's also a fundamental issue of the accuracy of the information on the package, where it exists, back or front. And that adds another layer of challenge that I think we need to accept, and we need to advocate for. So I've kind of abandoned my speech. I don't think there's much more to say, but I've made the points that I think are relevant to the presentation. So I want to use the opportunity to thank the work that Professor Henry and his team have done. And I'd like to suggest that we now take this study and package it. I know you have additional analysis to do. And let us map out a road plan, an action plan that will inform and educate, correct, and lead to an end result that we are already committed to. And I'd like to be involved in that conversation on next steps, and I'm going to ask Simone to coordinate that, and let us sit down with those relevant persons and plan that out. And frankly speaking, I would want to take that plan to Cabinet for a conversation, because I think at the highest level of policy, we also need to firstly be aware, that we shouldn't take it for granted that we're all aware, right? And then beyond being aware, sign off on that program to go forward. But this is what we want to do. It's the same approach that we want to take for sugars and salts and so on. And I reiterate as I close that this component of the public health response is as important as building hospitals and health centers and hiring more doctors. Indeed, I am prepared to say it is more important, because at the rate we're going, public health and our capacity to respond is just plainly unsustainable. I don't think we can say it any clearer. We're not going to keep up with the cost of healthcare if we ignore the other components of good, healthy living. And so it has to be front and center of any program that we have. And that is my commitment as the lead policymaker in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Today's type of work and what we need to do from here is no less important than the demands for more money to build hospitals and hospital beds and emergency rooms, because the two are intricately linked. And indeed, to focus only on hospitals is almost putting the cart before the horse. So let us be clear on this, and let us help others to also be similarly clear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, as always, putting into perspective what needs to be our policy focus and direction at this time. And, summarily to say prevention is always better than cure. If nothing else we have gotten from today, it is to reinforce that fact. So at this time, let me apologize first and foremost. We had a little break in transmission. We lost internet for a little bit, so persons would have missed some of Professor Henry's presentation. But just to reassure everyone that both for our media partners as well as persons who have joined online, we will share the full recording. And so we really sincerely apologize to those who would have missed parts of Professor Henry's presentation, but not to worry. We'll provide the full recording later on. At this time, let me just open up for question and answer segment. We invite our media partners to pose their questions at this time if they have any by raising your hands, and Mr. Davidson will indicate or acknowledge, and so we can open the floor for questions at this time, or you may type it into the chat if you so desire, and then we can read out the question. So Professor Henry or Minister or anybody from the team can answer that question or those questions. Okay, similarly to Tuesday, everything was clear as crystal. I'm not using mud this time, but clear as crystal. So let's move on then, and it's time for us to close our proceedings today. Let me first begin by thanking Minister Tufton for his vision, drive, and commitment to this cause of addressing the NCD epidemic, utilizing various strategies and policies, strongly supported by evidence as we continue to work towards mitigating the impact of this particular problem on our population. Our thanks, of course, to Professor Henry for leading the team that conducted this very important piece of research, which will contribute to the body of local evidence that supports the necessity of the development of specific policies and strategies to address the problem that has so clearly been outlined. I cannot emphasize strongly enough how all the initiatives that are being implemented at this juncture form a critical step in the right direction as we champion the cause of public health, especially in the fight against NCDs. This is a testament to our commitment as a ministry and as key stakeholders as we strive to realize what we have always advocated: better health for all. Strong policy action is required if we are to make significant impact in combating the NCD epidemic in our country, and therefore contribute positively to impacting the lives of our fellow Jamaicans. I would like to thank everyone who participated in the program and members of the health team and the public who joined us online. Have a wonderful rest of day and week, and it has always been a pleasure to host you through these proceedings. But just for future reference, I'm now charging for every MC, function that I have to MC. Yes, just check Mr. Davidson for my rates. But thank you so very much for joining us. Take care.